So, we've had a lot happen since the last time we talked. Biden's out, Kamala's in, and the media's going full 1984. And moving forward, you should keep this quote in mind. It's going to serve you well. The media is not really a window on reality. It's more of a stage on which officials and journalists perform self-scripted, self-serving fictions. And that's proven more true every day, to be honest. The entire political landscape is in disarray. But after watching the fallout with Biden, him hiding for a week, all the weird gaslighting, the lies, and then the media swooning with North Korean-esque propaganda, well, I had to remind myself that when it comes to politics, nothing is real. The political class, media, and big tech are scrubbing past articles and lying with Orwellian flair in a desperate attempt to push Kamala Harris onto the American public. It's gonna fail, and simultaneously continue to burn their credibility to ash. If only Orwell could see us now. The media is trying to rewrite history, in an effort to help the regime for the 2024 election. In the past week, the media started multiple hoaxes. CBS claimed that Trump is lying about Harris donating to the Minnesota Freedom Fund, bailing out dangerous criminals during the George Floyd riots. When in fact, anyone could find out for themselves, because Harris promoted the fund on her Twitter account and encouraged people to donate multiple times.
Harris sending this out on X. If you're able to chip in now to the Minnesota Freedom Fund to help post bail for those protesting on the ground in Minnesota.
Thanks to Harris's promotion, the group reportedly raised $35 million in just a few weeks.
Darnica Floyd, charged with second-degree murder for stabbing a friend to death. And she got out of jail, too. A twice-convicted rapist, currently charged with kidnapping and sexual assault, and he walks out, too.
The Freedom Fund raked in donations when it was promoted by many, including now Vice President Kamala Harris.
Sean Michael Tillman shot and killed a passenger on a train platform after reportedly being released from jail 3 weeks prior. All thanks to the Minnesota Freedom Fund.
Donovan Boone was charged with breaking into the home of an ex-girlfriend and choking her. Freedom Fund bailed him out for $3,000 cash, and he hasn't shown up for court since.
I often don't even look at a charge specifics when I bail someone out.
The Hennepin County attorney called out the Minnesota Freedom Fund for bailing Mosley out of jail twice previously, even though he was arrested for having a gun in the courthouse.
The Minnesota Freedom Fund, which pays cash bail for low-income criminals, paid Tims's entire $10,000 bail in cash.
11 days later, police found a man bleeding from the head and ears in this alley. Police were able to arrest Tims in connection to this violent assault.
Howard was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. The Minnesota Freedom Fund acknowledged supporting Howard's bail.
And then the media said that Biden dropped out of the race to save democracy, and even compared him to George Washington at one point. Yeah. Now the reality of that situation is that Biden was forced out by top Democrats, as reported by Seymour Hersh. We'll talk about that in a few minutes because it was basically a coup. And then the media claimed that Kamala Harris was not a diversity hire. Which, for this one too, it's easy to find out they're lying, because Joe Biden made it clear in 2020 he was picking his VP based on gender and skin color alone. I mean, the media reported this for years, and we're not secretive about the reasons, as you can see on the screen.
Have to believe in what can be unburdened by what has been.
And we must always see who we can be, unburdened by who we have been.
And then finally, they are now claiming that Kamala Harris was never the border czar. Yeah, so the media spent the past week scrubbing their own articles, changing the reporting from 2021. That clearly stated Kamala was put in charge of addressing the border. She even tweeted about this herself, and it was reported across all media organizations.
"Quote-unquote border czar." Vice President Harris was not a border czar.
Meantime, Vice President and border czar Kamala Harris facing some backlash.
What he said about Harris and immigration was not true. She was never appointed border czar.
And this will be her first visit to the U.S.-Mexico border region since she was appointed as the border czar by President Biden.
People gonna have to counter the misinformation. You already hear folks talking about the border czar. She wasn't the border czar.
President Biden tapped Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris, to be the border czar.
Now, she wasn't the border czar. That's what Republicans labeled her.
They were very critical of Kamala Harris, especially in her role as border czar.
Now what she's up against is folks lying about her border record, calling her a border czar.
Kamala Harris, who was appointed as the border czar.
The Biden team didn't declare her the border czar. They wanted her to work on kind of the root causes of immigration.
There has been so much criticism against Kamala Harris. You know, she was the border czar.
Calling her sort of the border czar, which wasn't necessarily the case.
So the border, if they weren't planning to address it in a major way, do not make her your border czar.
czar. She met with some of the Northern Triangle countries, but nothing has effectively changed.
This is a rather pathetic attempt at rewriting history, but they went really hard on the border czar topic. They even passed out little note cards around DC, with talking points that helped their minions dismiss the claim with tribalist fervor. And then, of course, the media ran with it like a kid holding scissors.
She was never actually border czar.
Border czar, which was not something that was formally conveyed upon her.
She's been labeled incorrectly by some members of the right as the border czar.
Republicans named her the border czar.
Republicans have always exaggerated what her job was at the border.
Republicans, again, have labeled her the border czar.
But that's not exactly what President Biden asked her to do.
She was never put in charge of the border.
That wasn't actually her task.
Not to secure it, but to address the underlying roots of migration.
She was charged with leading the administration's efforts to address the root causes of migration.
The root causes of migration to the U.S.
The root causes.
Root causes.
Root causes.
The root causes. Root causes
of immigration.
We also want to point out that right now apprehension numbers continue to decrease in our country, especially over the last few months.
And I just want to note that border crossings have been going down.
And illegal border crossings are lower right now.
Migrant crossings continue to drop.
Border crossings are way down.
Border crossings are down.
This is what I'm talking about. The media is entirely controlled. It's state-run media.
Some of what he and his running mate are saying, well, it's just plain weird.
These guys are just weird. That's who they are.
As weird and creepy as J.D. Vance. Super weird idea from J.D. Vance.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, it's quite weird. They're just plain weird.
Just plain weird.
Just plain weird.
That stuff is weird. They come across weird, and then they start being weird. Yeah, they're weird.
Being a really weird.
He's such a weirdo.
Donald Trump and his weirdo running mate, they're weird. Deeply and profoundly weird.
They are weird.
These Republicans just being weird, it's just weird. It's really weird.
Republican weirdness goes even deeper.
Alright, that's enough of that. It goes on for a couple minutes, if you can believe it. It reminds me of that clip from a few years ago. This is dangerous to our democracy.
And I'm Ryan Wolf.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our
Treasure Valley communities,
The El Paso, Las Cruces communities, Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But
we are concerned about plaguing our country.
plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and false
news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 Although the recent propaganda regarding Harris and the border, well, there is a strategy at play. Have you ever heard of the wrap-up smear? This is the only thing Nancy Pelosi has ever explained well.
And it's a diversionary tactic. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You demonize, and then we call it the wrap-up smear. If you want to talk politics, you call it the wrap-up smear. You smear somebody with falsehoods and all the rest, and then you merchandise it. And then you write it, and they'll say, see, it's reported in the press that this, and this. So they have that validation that the press reported the smear, and then it's called the wrap-up smear. Now I'm going to merchandise the press's report on the smear that we made. And it's a tactic, and it's self-evident.
So what we're seeing right now for Harris is practically a reverse wrap-up smear, I guess. The media did this in 2016 and 2020 as a way to frame Trump, and now they're doing it in 2024 to save her. So, basically, they have a true story that's bad for a Democrat candidate. They get their hordes of propagandists to claim the story is false. Step number 2, well, you gotta scrub all your past articles. And they are doing that right now. That way, when people search for an answer about this topic, they're gonna come across the new articles claiming it was never true at all. And that way, when the right says that she was the border czar, the media and the Democrats will cite the recent lies from legacy media as proof of it being a false claim. Yeah, as I said, it's a reverse wrap-up smear. It's a lie wrapped in a bunch of different lies, and this is how the media rigs elections. They're going all out on this rewriting history tactic, It's actually pretty disturbing. Big Tech is even doing this with the Trump assassination attempt. From Kyle Becker, and I quote, "Big Tech scrubs Trump assassination attempt from the internet, and AI platforms are revising history." So yeah, we all know they're trying to bury and censor this information. But this is where it gets very weird. So Facebook, or Meta, was saying that Trump's assassination attempt was a fictional event that never even took place. ChatGPT, Google Search, DuckDuckGo, they were all doing the same exact thing. This is so much worse than election interference. Big tech platforms are implementing digital totalitarianism. End of quote. And I agree. They even placed warning labels over the infamous photo as being digitally altered and fake. I mean, this is crazy. Now, ever since they've been caught and admitted it was a quote-unquote error, I mean, yeah, sure, you gotta be a special kind of person to believe that. You know, we've just been seeing a lot of these quote-unquote errors happening all over the place. And it always skews in one direction. It's pretty odd, don't you think? If they were really accidents, you'd think they'd be distributed equally across the political spectrum, but that's never the case. As I said, they're going full Orwell on all fronts. Reality has no basis here. After all, it's politics, right? But let's get back to Kamala Harris. The establishment and legacy media really want you to forget about their past reports about her, because it proves they are lying about everything today. So let's take a little trip back in time and remind ourselves of what the media claimed a couple years ago.
There are reports that say that you have the lowest approval rating of any vice president.
Well, there are polls that also say I have great approval ratings.
Swing voters don't like Harris. How big a drag is Kamala Harris on the ticket?
She's a pretty big drag. I think she was arguably Biden's worst political decision.
They don't like her. There's lots of reasons they don't like her.
Kamala Harris's approval rating is now at 28%, which is an historic low for any modern vice president.
We're hearing it from mainstream media, one outlet after another, one leak after another. That Kamala Harris is the worst vice president ever, the worst politician ever.
We don't see the vice president. What people are saying to me, and I'm sure they're saying it to you, where's the vice president? Some White House officials are feeling that she came off looking unprepared for inevitable questions about when she might visit the southern border.
We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe. And I mean, I don't understand the point that you're making.
The point that Lester Holt was making was obvious to anyone else who was watching this interview, which is that the issues at the border are inextricably linked with the portfolio that she's been given.
So, compare that with the high praise today. As I've been trying to say, it's all fake. The gaslighting, the lies, the astroturfing for the Democrat candidates is reaching new levels. And the media is reaching new lows, that's for sure. Even the government tracking website, which essentially just keeps track of everyone's voting history and attendance, well, they deleted their 2019 page that ranked Kamala Harris as the most liberal of all 100 senators. They just straight up changed it.
Very different in the policies that you've supported in the past. You're considered the most liberal United States senator.
Somebody said that, and it actually was Mike Pence on the debate stage, but...
Yeah, well, actually, the nonpartisan GovTrack has rated you as the most liberal senator.
And yeah, I am radical. I do believe that we need to get radical about what we are doing and take it seriously.
Alright, so moving on to something different. You know, it's pretty crazy. The left runs around screaming about democracy and insurrection, only to then have no problem with the DNC elites selecting their candidate instead of having an actual primary. Voters have no say, and apparently that's perfectly fine. Just coup the sitting president and install whoever you want. Sure. The insurrection narrative takes another hit because it's empty, a hollow and hypocritical narrative. I mean, perhaps it was an insurrection against democracy when U.S. intelligence agencies promoted the Russiagate hoax. What about when 51 intelligence officials lied about the laptop to get it censored and influence the election? What about the time BLM burned down cities for weeks, causing between $1 and $2 billion in damages? Or when they violently attacked the Secret Service as they attempted to burn down the White House? Well, the Democrat Party celebrated all of it. But the real crazy part to me is that the primaries are basically non-existent. Elizabeth Warren stated on national TV that Democrats rigged the primary in 2016. And they just did it again in 2024. The Democrats have not held a legit primary for multiple cycles at this point. With everything we just talked about, you'd have to go back to, 2008? So 2008 to 2028. No elections, just a selection. Yet the same people go on TV every day and lecture America about attacks against democracy. End of quote. Yeah. I don't know how much more of it I can take, to be honest. So anyway, let's talk about the Biden coup. You know, DC was a quarter of an inch away from successfully removing both presidential candidates in the same week, one via assassination and the other via coup d'etat. However, if you think about it, we've really been living in one giant coup for years at this point. And I quote, Trump was spied on before becoming president. It was proved to be a part of a scheme cooked up by the DNC, the Clinton campaign, and the feds. And that spying led to Russiagate and fraudulent impeachments. And then, of course, we had the bioweapon come right before the election. Also, it was federally funded research. And then we had January 6th, which was seemingly orchestrated by the feds. Then the Whitmer kidnapping hoax that was intended to criminalize Trump supporters, also ran by feds. Now the attempt on his life screams JFK, and that's because it looks like the Secret Service stood down to get him killed. And it's hard to say for sure, because we still have no clarity or real answers, despite numerous testimonies. And on top of that, in less than 10 days, the story has practically been memory holed. And now, they've forced out his competition in what appears to be another coup, because the polls clearly showed he was going to lose. Now we could also add in a few more too. Do you remember when they refused to remove troops from Syria despite him ordering them to do so? What about General Milley telling China that he would not carry out orders from Trump in 2020, and also claiming that he would go behind the nation's back to warn them? We could throw in the 2020 election mail-in ballot scheme, the BLM color revolution. The entire system has been wielded against him for 8 years straight, including the attempt on his life. And it's only July. They aren't done yet. End of quote. And I 100% agree with that. Our wild ride is not over. But let's find out a little bit more about this Biden coup. And I quote, Biden was blackmailed into dropping out of the race after top Democrats threatened to remove him from office with the 25th Amendment, and that's according to the New York Post. It's becoming clear that the coup was a well-orchestrated plan by Democrats. Biden's June debate appeared to be a setup, so Democrats could remove him in time to get a new candidate. Now, according to Politico, Nancy Pelosi actually threatened him if he refused to drop out of the race. And I quote, Nancy Pelosi made it clear that they could do this the easy way or the hard way. And well, the hard way appears to have been the 25th Amendment. Biden's own staff did not even know he was dropping out until they read the letter on social media, which I might add was digitally signed and not on official letterhead. And to me, that's pretty strange. And yeah, the staff did not even know, so I'm gonna venture a guess and say Biden had no idea either. He probably woke up and said, wait a second, I'm out? Now, according to Seymour Hersh, it's the same story but with different players. His sources say that Obama led the coup. The article claims that Obama threatened to invoke the 25th Amendment, pressuring Biden to step down. It states that Democrat leaders Obama, Pelosi, Schumer, and Hakeem Jeffries were involved. And they did this because major donors were actually pushing for the change. I mean, in DC, it always comes down to money, doesn't it? So that does make sense. Now, should you be surprised that the establishment left performed a coup d'etat on Biden? Of course not. They all adopted various tenets of Marxist strategies. So, let me ask you, do you know anything about Kamala Harris and her family? Well, if not, this should be interesting for you. This is from Trevor Loudon. The evidence is clear. Kamala Harris is deeply connected to communist ideologies and individuals. From her parents' involvement in a group that admired communist leaders like Fidel Castro and Che Guevara, to her relationship with Willie Brown, a communist sympathizer, and her mentorship of individuals linked to Maoist communist groups. Kamala Harris's background is deeply concerning. She was supported by Steve Phillips, a former Marxist-Leninist and member of the pro-Chinese communist group, the League of Revolutionary Struggle. Now this guy, Steve Phillips, married into the wealthy Sandler family, using his connections and wealth to finance and support Kamala Harris's political career, just as he did for Barack Obama, Cory Booker, Stacey Abrams, and others. Furthermore, her political career has been supported by individuals with communist affiliations, including her current chief of staff and her husband, who works for a law firm with extensive ties to the Chinese Communist Party. Kamala Harris's communist ties cannot be ignored. It is crucial that the American people are aware of the true nature of the presumed Democratic presidential nominee. So the question is, what kind of future do we want for future generations? Well, I'll say, not this kind of future. Not this at all. And actually, she's openly talked about this before. Equity over equality. Yeah, y'all know what that means, right? The American dream has become a death sentence of drudgery, consumerism, and fatalism. A garage sale where the best of the human spirit is bartered away for comfort, obedience, and trinkets. It's unequivocally absurd, End of quote. But it doesn't have to be that way. Reject the communists, the power-hungry, the corporatists, and the social destroyers. Society as a whole has turned into a vast brainwashing machine. Its sole purpose is to create a social robot. So, don't obey. Think for yourself. The desperation on display is going to be their downfall. Typically, there's a tried and true formula to indoctrination. It's propaganda over time. It's all about incremental steps and conditioning, repetition, and normalization of concepts. Well, they are short on time and are flooding the zone with an unbelievable amount of lies, gaslighting, and astroturfing. As I said, it's going to be their downfall. Desperation, desperation, desperation. And, well, their hubris. It's the Achilles heel of the Leviathan system. We are peeling back the curtain and seeing how the machine truly operates on a daily basis. Now, it is pretty interesting to me, because the same thing happened with the global agenda. They expected Hillary Clinton to win in 2016, and they imagined having control for, realistically, the next 16 years as well, either with a Democrat or a uniparty Republican. However, when Trump won, they accelerated their timeline to 2030. They went full deconstructionist, full of demoralization campaigns, and well, it backfired. It woke up a massive swath of the population. Now, the entire global agenda is also in jeopardy. The same thing is happening here. They have 4 or 5 months basically to trick the public into accepting the new regime frontman, the new puppet. And, well, they are already burning themselves down. Most of us knew in our bones that things with the world were not right, long before it became a crisis. Well, it is a crisis now. The only thing I can suggest to you is this. Think deeply about every message you see coming out of the media and from politicians, because things are not as they appear. And the propaganda, the psyops, and the gaslighting are going to continue to increase and reach new levels of absurdity. It's to the point that you can make an argument that demoralization and the breakdown of reality itself is now the goal. So, make sure you defy it. Once again, this is HelioWave. If you like the content, like, comment, and subscribe. Share the video if you want to. If you're in a position to, consider subscribing on Locals, or you could use PayPal. As always, make sure you disobey those true fascistas, and yes, I do hope you have a good night.